and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage one of the #1 Batman authorities, Michael Uslan. So nice how they are so excited to see you, right?
Well, I gotta tell you, you'll have to come up later and check out these new Batman songs.
Look at that.
Very, very excited about it.
Wow, so thank you so much for being here with us, Michael. Talking in this really intimate circle. It's really cool. I already let them know that when they have questions at the end, they are free to shoot. I'm going to open up the room. But first of all, I would like to ask you a few questions. And I would love to know when your love affair with Batman started.
That sounds very provocative. So, you have to understand how much of a comic book fanboy geek I am, and have always been. My mom said I learned to read from comic books before I was 4 years old. And by the time I was a high school senior, 18, I had over 30,000 comic books in my possession. So my family moved into a new house, and my dad could not get his car in the garage. You have no idea what 30,000 comic books is like. So my father, who was a stonemason, built 3 walls of shelves, floor to ceiling in the garage, so I could put my comic books up, but it wasn't enough. So I filled up the rest of the garage, and actually the entire lifetime we had the house, my dad never once got the car in the garage. You're also looking at the kid who was at the very first comic book convention ever held on the planet Earth.
No way.
Oh, absolutely. It was July 1964. It was in a rundown Fleabag hotel in downtown New York City. 200 of us showed up at the first Comic-Con. It was 197 boys and 3 girls.
Oh.
And you have to understand, when I was growing up, comic books were very uncool as far as everyone else was concerned, especially the ladies. When I was in high school, if I was 16, 17, or 18, and girls found out that I still read and collected comic books, I was date challenged. It was just so uncool.
Michael, would you say that changed today? Isn't reading comic books cooler in our days now?
You know what? I think our Batman movie should take a little bit of the credit for that. Because what Batman 1989 did was not only change the comic book industry and change Hollywood, it changed the world's perception of superheroes and comic books. Mm-hmm. It impacted the world culture. All of a sudden, adults were willing to accept comic books and think, whoa, these superhero stories are not just for little boys. And that was a sea change in our pop culture all around the world. So today, comic books, superheroes are very mainstream, and the latest Marvel movies, you go to them, they're date movies. There's as many females in the audience as there are males. It was not like that before. So I have to just tell you one quick story about the first comic book convention.
Oh, I think we would love to hear that, yes.
So there's 197 boys and 3 girls. And it was put on by a guy who was a high school senior, who wore black leather and chains and had his hair slicked back. I was scared to death. I thought I was going to get knifed or something. And they didn't know what to do for Saturday night because it's 197 boys and 3 girls. So the 2 guys were talking and said, why don't we just tell everybody, come dressed up as your favorite superhero, and we'll give out prizes to the best costumes. Mm-hmm. And that was the night cosplay was born. And not only was I there, and you go to conventions now, you see 3/4 of the people are dressed up.
Yes.
This is where it started. And I was there in costume that my mom helped me make. I was DC Comics Sandman from the 1940s, a guy with a gas mask and There's a picture of me from that Comic-Con, actually, that was published in a magazine. But that's how far back I go with comic book conventions as well. So when you talk about a love affair, it started between me and comic books. And then I discovered really comic books at age 5. And I was very comfortable with Superman. He was on TV, he was bright, he was friendly. And to tell you the truth, at age 5, I was scared by Batman when I saw him on covers. I was.
Well, yeah, I can imagine how for like little kids that could be a little scary.
Little too dark for me, and it wasn't until I was a mature, sophisticated 8-year-old that I really started to love Batman. And that was when this love affair started, because when I was 8, I identified so much with Batman, because he was the first superhero I ever read who had no superpowers. He was human. His greatest superpower was his humanity. And oh my God, I identified with him. And in my heart of hearts, I really truly believed that if I studied very hard, and if I worked out very hard, and if my father bought me a cool car, I could be this guy. And that's really the turning point for me.
So would you say that the reason why you love Batman so much is because you were able to identify so much with him, not with like other superheroes?
I would say it's 3 things. That's certainly very, very important. Also, that I believe, you know, Stan Lee was a dear friend of mine. I met Stan when I was 11 years old, and he has been my mentor. He was my idol. I got to work together with him creatively.
That's amazing.
And I was honored. My son and I, last February, were 2 of the producers of Stan's memorial at Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. And we had the casts of so many Marvel movies, the animation, the TV shows. People like Lawrence Fishburne and Mark Hamill and RZA and Common all came out. And it was a great send-off for Stan. But I am a subscriber to Stan Lee's theory of supervillains. Stan said to me, Michael, the reason superheroes, those superheroes who are the most long-lasting and the most popular, are the ones who have had the greatest supervillains.
Oh, yeah, that's a good theory, isn't it?
He
what
said,
do you guys think?
Ultimately, it is the supervillains who define the superheroes. And if you look at Batman, out of the entire world of comic books, he's had the greatest rogues gallery of supervillains in history, inarguably the greatest supervillain in history in the form of the Joker. And as a comic book fanatic, the only 2 superheroes who come even close to Batman in terms of superhero villains are Spider-Man and the Flash. The 3rd reason is the car. The car is magic. Ask James Bond. I mean, he was influenced by the car. It really is magic, and when you're an 8-year-old kid and see a car like that, you're just captivated for the rest of your life.
Did you, I mean, you guys know that we have the cars in the hall back there. Did you get a chance to look at them and like sit in them maybe even?
I am happy to report to you. All right, you want to know how geeky I really am? I have driven in every single Batmobile. I have pictures of me and my kids in Batmobiles. So when we were doing the 1989 Batman movie, we were filming it on the back lot of Pinewood Studios outside of London, and we actually had 5 square city blocks of Gotham City that were built based on the genius design work of my dear friend, our production designer Anton Furst, who would go on and win the Oscar that year for production design. And I had my kids on the set. My son was 8, my daughter was 4. And the stunt driver, Andy Smith, said, let me take your kids for a ride in the Batmobile through Gotham City. So that 1989 Batmobile is a 2-seater. So my son sat in the passenger seat, and they kind of wedged my daughter into the middle. And then, like every good, wonderful big brother, he turned to his little sister and said, Sarah, if I press this button, it's going to be an ejector seat, and you're going to shoot out of the top of the car onto the roof of that building. So to this day, my daughter cannot and will not sit in the middle seat of a car. But the kids had a memorable experience driving in the Batmobiles. The nice thing is, David was 8, Sarah was 4, and they have a father who was 12. And I'm happy to report I'm still 12. Don't look at all this white hair. Inside, I am still 12 years old.
So I can imagine you kids must be huge Batman fans too, right? Because they grew up with it.
David is a total comic book geek. He collects, reads everything. I don't know if Sarah's ever read a comic book.
Oh!
Maybe she read Archie, or Richie Rich, but she is not a comic book girl, but she is a fan of Batman, and that makes a big difference.
Nice. So let's go back in time. Do you remember what you thought when you first saw the Batman TV show?
Yes. All right. I can only tell this story in the context of its time. So in 1966, when the Batman TV show came on, what you have to understand is, to the entire world, that was the one and only perception of Batman they had. Outside the comic books, the world only knew this show. So I couldn't wait. For 3 months I'd been waiting for the show to come on the air. And I was downstairs in our den. The show comes on, I'm so excited. And I go, oh, it's in color. Oh, those sets are extravagant. They're spending a lot of money on it. Oh, that Batmobile looks cool. And 15 minutes into the show, it hit me. This is a comedy. They're making fun of Batman. The whole world is laughing at Batman. He's a joke. That just killed me. As a hardcore comic book fan back then, somebody who knew and understood that the true Batman, created in 1939 by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, was a creature of the night, was a guy who stalked deeply disturbed supervillains in the shadows. And this was not that. So I made a vow that night. I made a vow like young Bruce Wayne once made a vow. But he made his vow over the slaughtered body of his parents, and my parents were safe upstairs in the kitchen. But I vowed, someday, I will find a way to show the world the real Batman, the true Batman, that creature of the night, dark and serious. And somehow, I am going to try to erase from the collective consciousness of the world these 3 new words I kept seeing on TV: pow, zap, and wham. And that was my vow. And if you look at the Batman movies, and you say, where did this all start? It started that night in our den when I made that commitment to myself.
Wow, I think that's worth an applause. I think so too. Wow, so you really stuck to your vow and made it come true.
Yeah, if there's anything I learned in life, you can make your dreams come true. But it's not easy, and it's not fast. I speak at Comic-Cons and universities all around the world, and now it's going to be kind of like the dad lecturing to his kids. But I find that there's a lot of young people all over the world right now who have this misguided sense of entitlement. They think the world is going to come to them, and they sit back on their couch like the world owes them something. But it's the young people who get up off the couch and who discover their passions in life and then follow their passions. That's what it takes to make a dream come true. And the people, if they get up off the couch, I think there's only about maybe at most 15% of the kids who are getting up off that couch. So their competition's no longer 100%. It's like 15%, and the chance of their success just skyrocketed. So my dad, I told you, was a stonemason. My mom was a bookkeeper. I'm a blue-collar kid. I didn't come from money. So I had this dream, but I couldn't buy my way into Hollywood like a lot of people do. I didn't know anyone in Hollywood. I had no relatives in Hollywood. So how do you get there from here? And for me, it's about following your passion, never giving up, and always looking for a door that's open just a crack, getting that foot in it. And I think that's the process.
I love that we're getting so much motivational talk here, don't you? That's great.
If my kids were here, they would be rolling their eyes and going, damn.
No, I think you like it, don't you?
You're very kind.
So you made that vow, you stuck to that vow, and you followed your dream, but how exactly did you do it? You got up off the couch, and then what?
How many of you were here last night when I spoke? Okay. Will you forgive me if I repeat the college story?
Are you okay with that? Okay, great.
If you want to go out and have a smoke or get a cup of coffee, you can. So my first opportunity came when I was in college. Mm-hmm. And I went to Indiana University, and they were offering this deal of the century. They had an experimental curriculum department. And they said, if you have an idea for a college course that's never been taught before and had the backing of a department on campus, you then could appear before a panel of deans and professors and pitch your course. Mm-hmm. If the dean approved it, you could teach it on campus for 3 hours of credit. And this was even though I was just a junior in undergrad. So I went to the folklore department and I said, comic book superheroes are contemporary folklore. It's our modern day mythology. The ancient gods of Greece and Rome and Egypt all still exist today. Only they wear spandex and capes. So I call him Superman. In a different era, they called him Ulysses. In a different era, they called him Beowulf. But it's still the same idea. It is about great heroes who give people hope and fight the demons and dragons of their day. So the head of the folklore department said, you're absolutely right, we will back you on this course. So I then go into pitch. And I was in college, so my hair's down to my shoulders. I was wearing a Spider-Man t-shirt and clutching my comic books and wearing my hippie love beads. Thank you very much. And as I go walking into this conference room, it was dark mahogany with a long conference room table, professors sitting around, the dean at the end. I thought I had just walked into the secret sanctum of the Justice League. And as I walk in, do you ever see, I don't know if it's true in Germany like it is in the United States, do you ever see old people who have like a pair of half glasses and they wear it at the end of their nose? Have you seen that?
I think we do, yes.
So he's looking at me over his glasses. He's looking down at me and he says, so you're the fellow who wants to teach a course on funny books at my university. And I knew I was in deep trouble.
Oh, it's okay, you can say it. It's fine.
So I started my pitch. He lets me speak for 2 minutes and then says, Mr. Uslan, stop. He says, come on. I read comic books when I was a kid. I read every issue of Superman I could get my hands on. Mythology, folklore. He says, give me a break. All comic books are cheap entertainment for little children. That's it, and I reject your theory. So, I could have bowed my head, picked up my funny books, and walked out the door, and that would have been it.
Were you at that moment, were you like, oh man?
Yeah, but I stood there and I said, you know what, I have nothing to lose here. So I stood my ground. And I looked at the dean and I said, Dean, may I just ask you 2 questions? And he said, ask me anything you want. I said, are you familiar with the story of Moses? And he looked at me and goes, yeah, so? I said, so Dean, very quickly, could you just summarize the story of Moses for me? And he sat back and he folded his arms and he looked at me and he said, Mr. Uslan, I don't know what game you're playing here, but I'll play this with you. He said, the Hebrew people were being persecuted. Their firstborn were being slain. So a Hebrew couple placed their infant son in a little wicker basket and sent him down the river Nile. There he's discovered by an Egyptian family who raised them as their own son. When the boy grows up, he learns of his true heritage and then became a great hero to his people. But I go, stop. Dean, thank you so much. I appreciate that. You said before you read Superman comics when you were a kid. By any chance, do you remember the origin story of Superman? He says, of course I do. The planet Krypton was about to blow up. A scientist and his wife placed their infant son in a little rocket ship and sent him to Earth. There he's discovered by the Kents, who raised him as their own son. And then he stops. stares at me for what I swear was an eternity, and then says, "Your course is accredited."
Well, that was very clever, Michael.
I'm now the world's first college professor of comic books. I can't believe I pulled this off. So I'm walking back to my apartment, and as I'm walking back, I can hear inside my head my mom's voice. And it's what she always used to say to me, "Michael, you could have the greatest creative ideas in the world, but if you don't market yourself, if you don't market them, nobody will know about it." All right, so I'm a junior in Bloomington, Indiana. Okay, we used to call it the oasis in the desert. What am I gonna do? So figuring I have nothing to lose, I picked up the telephone and I called United Press International. Now back then, that was as big a news syndicate as the Associated Press is today. I asked to speak to a reporter. The man gets on the phone and I proceed to scream at him. "What is wrong with you? This is outrageous. You're not doing your job. You're supposed to be the watchdogs of our society." He says, "Sir, calm down." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "What am I talking about? Are you kidding me? I just heard there's a course on comic books being taught at Indiana University. Are you telling me as a taxpayer in this state, they are using my money to teach our children comic books? This is outrageous. This has got to be a communist plot to subvert the youth of America." And I slammed down the phone. It took this poor man 3 days to find out, did IU really have a course on comic books? And if so, who was the lunatic teaching it? He found me. And he comes down and does an interview with a photographer. This interview, which was a third of a page long, gets picked up by every newspaper in North America and actually a bunch in Europe. My phone starts ringing off the hook. I am invited on radio talk shows. I'm invited on television talk shows. I never taught one comic book class that wasn't filled with television cameras and reporters. The CBS Evening News, the NBC Nightly News. I had one night in my class, I had 4 reporters sitting in the front row. 2 from the Sunday supplement newspapers for families and kids, Playboy and Penthouse magazine. This just appealed to everybody. And about 2 weeks go by, and my phone rings. And it's this exuberant male voice. He goes, "Hi, is this Mike Uslan?" I go, "Yeah." "Hiya, Mike. This is Stan Lee from Marvel Comics in New York City."
Oh, man.
I call this my burning bush moment. I was talking to my God.
Oh, man.
He says, "Mike, everywhere I look, I'm reading about you in newspapers. I'm seeing you on television. What you're doing is great for the entire comic book industry. How can I help you?" And that began my adult relationship with Stan that would be a friendship that would last the rest of my life.
Isn't that amazing, guys? Wow.
Applause for Stan. 2 hours later, my phone rings again, and it's a dour male voice. "Mr. Uslan, hello, my name is Saul Harrison. I'm vice president of DC Comics in New York City. We publish Superman and Wonder Woman." I go, "Yeah, I'm Batman, I know." He said, "We've been listening to you on the radio and reading about you in magazines, and we think you are a very innovative young man. We'd like to fly you to New York City and discuss ways we might be able to work together." Okay. Comic book geek dream come true. I am in the offices of DC Comics, and they offer me a job. That I will work at DC in New York during the summers, and when I go back to Indiana to study, they will put me on retainer. I go to work at DC. I'm there, and it's getting towards 6 p.m. one night. And all of a sudden, I hear yelling and screaming coming from down the hall. I go rushing down. It sounded like somebody was being killed. I go rushing down. It was the editor of a comic book called The Shadow. I don't know if any of you remember The Shadow. About 20 years or so, it was an Alec Baldwin movie. The Shadow was a character who had the most direct influence on the creation of Batman. So, very important character in history. And I go, are you okay? He said, no, I'm not okay. I said, what's the problem? He says, the problem is, they just told me that there is a shadow comic book script that is due in tomorrow to meet the deadline. I don't have a shadow comic book script. I don't have a shadow story. I don't even have an idea for a shadow story. I said, I have an idea for a shadow story. He said, you do? I didn't. But so what? I saw the door was open a crack, so I just stuck my foot in. He says, all right, come in, sit down. What's your idea for a shadow story? Well, you're gonna love this. It's really, really great, and the wheels are spinning like mad. He goes, well, what's it about? I go, well, it is, and now my wife and I, girlfriend at the time, had just come back from a visit to Niagara Falls on the US-Canadian border. And I said, you know, all the shadow stories are set in the 30s and the 40s. And I learned that in the 1930s and 40s, people were going over Niagara Falls in barrels. And they were walking across the falls on a tightrope. I said, so what about nighttime? Searchlights going, Niagara Falls, a tightrope, and the shadow is battling a bad guy. And he said, that's a great visual cover. But Michael, what's the story about? So I said, well, I'm glad you asked me that question. Because the story is about smuggling. And he said, well, what are they smuggling? I said, well, they are smuggling drugs. And he goes, all right, but what is the creative point? What's the key creative thing that makes it different? So I said, well, this is the best part, so I've been saving it for last. They were going over the falls in barrels back then. False bottoms in the barrels that they would put the drugs in. They go over the Canadian side, they wash up on the American side, that's how they're getting them through. He goes, that's different. Can you have a full script on my desk by 6 p.m. tomorrow? I said, not a problem. He says, go do it. I'm now a writer for DC Comics.
We can learn so much from you. It's like incredible how you do that, and then people just call you and you just find your way. And
no, you've got to make it happen. So you've got to be daring and stick your foot in the door. That's really what it comes down to. Seriously, what have you got to lose? So the ending of the story is 2 weeks later after I hand in the script. I'm walking down the halls of DC. Who's walking down the hall toward me but the guy who arguably was the most important comic book editor in history? His name was Julius Schwartz. Julie was responsible for returning Batman to his darker roots after the TV series went off the air. He was also responsible for the creation of the Justice League, of the Silver Age Green Lantern, Flash, Hawkman, Atom. And he was gruff. He was a gruff guy until you got to know him, then he was a marshmallow. And he sees me, remember, I'm a college student with my hair down to here. And he goes, hey kid. I go, yes, Julie. I read your shadow script. You did? Yeah. It didn't stink. I said, whoa, thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my God. And then he looks at me and goes, how'd you like to take a shot at writing Batman? This was my dream since I was 8 years old. I still get the chills. I now became a writer of Batman comics. I'm still in college. And when my first Batman came out, amid all the tears, I panicked. I said, oh my God, this dream I had since I was 8 years old has come true. I need a new dream. What's my new dream gonna be? It took me 10 minutes for the epiphany. Because then I remembered back to that cold night in January 1966 and that vow I made.
yes.
I said, okay, I am going to buy the rights to Batman, and I am going to make dark and serious Batman movies and show the world the true Batman. And that was what then led to the next step.
But how you just could buy the rights to Batman?
Isn't it unfathomable that a kid in his 20s was able to buy the rights to Batman. So
How did you make that work now,
it's
Michael?
impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounded impossible, yeah.
Okay, so remember Saul Harrison, who mentored me into the comic book business, called me? He's now the president of DC Comics. I go to see him. I said, Saul, I want to buy the rights to Batman and make dark and serious Batman movies. And he was very fatherly toward me. He goes, Michael, for God's sake, don't do that. He said, I don't want to see you lose all your money. He said, son, don't you understand? Since Batman went off the air on television, the brand is, and this is a quote, as dead as a dodo. He says, Michael, nobody's interested in Batman anymore. And I said, yeah, but Saul, if we make dark and serious movies, nobody's ever seen a comic book movie or a superhero movie like that. It'll almost be like a new form of entertainment. And he goes, is there any way I can talk you out of this? And I said, no. And he said, all right, come on in. So, panic time. I found myself the most amazing partner. He was my dad's age. He was legendary in the motion picture business. In MGM's glory days, all divisions reported to him. He was chairman of their film selection committee. And Ben Melniker put together the deals for some movies that I hope you've all at least heard of if you haven't seen them yet. One was called Ben-Hur. One was called Dr. Zhivago. One was called 2001: A Space Odyssey. And with Ben, we quickly raised some money privately from a whole bunch of people that we knew, friends, doctors, lawyers, dentists, whatever we could find. And these were people that knew nothing about Batman. They didn't believe in Batman, they believed in me. And that's why they were giving us the money. It took us 6 months to negotiate the deal with DC, and on October 3rd, 1979, we signed the papers, got the rights to Batman. I'm a kid in my 20s. So now, if you tell people, oh, I heard this story from the guy, he bought the rights to Batman when he was 20s, and they said, how is it possible? You can give them the actual, very unglamorous answer. I was the only one on Earth who showed up. The only one interested. That's how I got the rights to Batman.
Wow. Well, now since then you produced every single Batman movie, and there is a new one coming up, and I was just really curious if you can share with us what you think about the new Batman. I'm sure you guys are interested in that as well. Robert Pattinson is going to be Batman.
Oh, really? Thank you. Glad to hear this. Breaking news. Yeah, so let's talk about Batman movies for a moment, if I may. To me, the star of the movie is not this actor or that actor or that actor. The star of the movie is not about, oh, great, Tom Cruise is going to play Batman, or Harrison Ford is going to play Batman. The star of the Batman movies is Bruce Wayne. Batman is the star. Batman is who everyone wants to see, along with the supervillains. So, how does a filmmaker make the choice of which actor to cast? And I think the real key question for fans and all of us to focus on is the filmmaker. So we've seen the genius of Tim Burton. We have seen the genius of Christopher Nolan. The question becomes, is there a filmmaker who you see has a knowledge of a character, has an understanding of a character, a passion and a love for the character? Does that filmmaker have a vision for the character? And if so, does he or she, do you believe, know how to execute that vision? And if you can answer those questions successfully, then for people like me, my role is to become the world's #1 cheerleader. And you have to trust in your filmmakers. So let's talk historically as to what's happened. And we can talk about this because I'm a fanboy too. Back in 1988, when it was announced Michael Keaton was going to play Batman, there was an uproar like the world had never seen before. And understand, this was before computers and before social media, and before there were comic book conventions all over the planet. Just in mainstream media, this became the hottest, most controversial topic all over. And the fans were up in arms. How can you have a comedian play Batman? Oh, you guys are gonna revert it back to the 1960s show, you're gonna destroy Batman. Until they saw the movie and saw what Tim Burton's vision was and how he executed it. And then, like, the fans never wanted anyone else to be Batman. Then we jump a little bit ahead of time. We have a new filmmaker in by the name of Christopher Nolan. And word goes out that for The Dark Knight, he is casting Heath Ledger as the Joker. The fan reaction was berserk. How dare you cast some gay cowboy to play the Joker? He'll destroy the character forever. And then, of course, after they see the movie, they never want anyone else to be the Joker. And it repeated again with Anne Hathaway when it was announced she would play Catwoman, because she was not the obvious choice. People were thinking maybe Angelina Jolie or somebody, and oh, she's the girl next door, she could never do it. And then she did this brilliant job. And then when Ben Affleck, when it was announced he was going to be Batman, I thought they were going to really surround the studio with pitchforks and torches. So then Robert Pattinson's announced, and the controversy on both sides breaks out all over again. So it's a repeated formula. And my position is this: trust the filmmaker and give the filmmaker and the filmmaker's vision the benefit of the doubt. And then wait till you see the movie. And then once you see the movie, judge the hell out of it. But I think that's really the formula, you know, going forward. I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be more enthused as a Batman fan that Matt Reeves is the filmmaker in charge and has selected Robert Pattinson to be his next Batman.
Well, we're all super excited to see that, definitely.
And don't forget, there's a Joker movie coming out.
There is, yeah. Who's excited for the Joker movie? Are there? Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Can you?
I just want to say this. Todd Phillips is the filmmaker there, and Todd had an incredible vision for this. All I can tell you is, in my humble opinion, the world is getting a little oversaturated with comic book movies and TV everywhere we turn. When I pick up a newspaper and find out that, oh my goodness, on May 5th, 2027, Ant-Man 5 is going to open, I better write that down in my calendar. The world's gone a little bit haywire. So, not being a great fan in any media of oversaturation, I love when something comes out and it's different and it's unique. I thought Guardians of the Galaxy was different and unique when it came out. I thought Deadpool was different and unique when it came out. This Joker movie is different and unique, and it's unlike any comic book movie you've ever seen. I think it's maybe more like a Martin Scorsese, low-budget film noir crime drama. But I have all the faith in the world in Todd, the brilliantly talented Joaquin Phoenix, Robert De Niro. It's an incredible group of people that have brought this to life.
Wow, you really made us curious now. We have some time, and if there are some questions from you guys, I would love to open the round up. We have someone, a lovely girl, up in front here. She has a microphone. So if there's any question you always dreamed of asking Michael Uslan, he's all yours now. Is there someone
who's going to have the nerve to be the first
yeah,
person? That's always the question.
Who's brave enough to ask? Oh, we've got a lady in the front. That's great.
Hi.
Hi.
So first of all, I want to thank you for your openness here. And my question is directly to the newest Batman movies who came out, because I grew up loving Batman too. My father loved it as the same reason as you, because he has no superpowers. And then the first one I really watched after the comics were Batman Begins, and I really enjoyed it. But the new ones, the Batman design, I thought it horrible, really, because you wear two different bat designs, on your shirt and on your cap. And I just wanted to ask you, how is it as a producer, as a Batman fan from the beginning, to see how the bat shifts, and if you have your own opinion to the costume designers and everything?
That is a great, daring question to ask. Thank you. Thank you for that. So the way I'm going to respond is by not talking specifically about Batman, but instead talking generally about the motion picture industry, okay? So generally, in today's motion picture industry, what used to be simply movie studios are in many cases international conglomerates. They own many different companies, many different businesses, and often they find there are many different wheels to be greased in the process. Sometimes, generally, in the motion picture industry, studios become very, very enamored of toys and merchandising and licensing and Happy Meals. When they become so enamored of that becomes a center point of concentration. When there are studios and various projects out there that bring in filmmakers and dictate, okay, you will make these movies light and bright, kiddie-friendly, family-friendly, and to appease all the toy companies, let's make sure there's 3 heroes and 3 villains, and each one have 2 costume changes and 2 vehicles. Then, in my mind's eye, they stop making movies and they start making 2-hour infomercials for toys, which is not, to me, the best idea. I'm an old school guy, and I personally believe there are simply 10 rules to making a successful motion picture. Number 1, story. You can write it down. Number 2, story. Number 3, story. Number 4, story. Number 5, story. Number 6, story. Number 7, character. Number 8, character. Number 9, character. Number 10, story. Now, if instead, generally in the motion picture industry, concentration is put on blowing things up and special effects, something's got to suffer. And many times in the industry, it is story and character that suffer. So I remain a fan of great stories, and I believe if you have filmmakers with a vision who you believe in, with great stories, great characters, they'll sell toys anyway. But that's kind of my overall general philosophy, having nothing to do with Batman.
That's a great answer.
So that was a very long answer to a very short question.
Diplomatic, yeah. But I think we got your point, yeah. Thank you.
I love talking about other people and other companies in the industry.
Is there someone else who has a question and who's brave enough to ask it? I mean, now is your yes?
Hi.
Hi.
You talked a lot about the villains and how important they are for the protagonists in movies, and I'm curious, what is your favorite one and why of Batman villain?
The Bösewicht?
Yeah.
The villains? Yeah.
Villains.
Who is
Oh,
your
sorry.
favorite? Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, okay. Great question, thank you. So, now I gotta talk more as comic book fanboy than anything. The greatest villain in the history of comic books is the Joker. The Joker was co-created by one of my mentors, Jerry Robinson, and a guy I was so lucky to have met twice when I was a kid, Bill Finger. And they created a character who represents to me the very, very, very thin line that Batman walks. Bruce Wayne saw his parents murdered before his eyes when he was a kid. He easily could have gone the dark side after that. He could have gone the same way the Joker did. There is such a thin line separating these two guys. And if it wasn't for Alfred in particular, Commissioner Gordon, a woman named Leslie Tompkins, who anchored young Bruce Wayne to his humanity, and still do to this day, he easily could have slipped. So when we look at the eternal dance that Batman and the Joker do, the Joker to me, I think of Edgar Allan Poe's Cask of Amontillado, if you ever read that, where it discusses the mask of the carnival hiding the seething horror lurking beneath the surface. That to me is a Joker. Now when you pit these two together in that dance, isn't it interesting that you've got the force of good who looks evil and dark and monstrous, and the force of evil who looks like carnival and comedy and friendly? It's an amazing, amazing dance they do. And having that balance, that yin and yang through eternity, I don't think it can ever be matched in the history of comics or being translated to movies. Now, I mean, I am a huge Thanos fan. Huge Thanos fan. My son collects everything Thanos. Jim Starlin, who created Thanos, is one of my comic book gods. The Red Skull is incredible. Doctor Doom is amazing. Galactus is supreme. Darkseid is great. Lex Luthor is classic. But nobody comes close to the Joker. Not in terms of depth and everything it means as you go textured and layered underneath the surface. Now, I don't then want to discount the rest of Batman's villains. I certainly wouldn't do that. Catwoman comes next for me, because she's not purely evil, she's not purely good, she is so gray, and then there's the physical attraction between her and Batman. And isn't it interesting, Batman's been around 80 years, and except for his first year of publication, or two, when he was involved with two ladies, Julie Madison and Linda Page, who were normal, he's always been attracted to bad girls. And that's interesting. There have now been psychological books written about Batman, and there are huge chapters dealing with that issue. So I find that the Catwoman thing and the male-female thing to be a wonderfully interesting dynamic that never gets old. Beyond that are so many, Ra's al Ghul. The way he's been combined into really the origin story of Batman in so many ways. And the relationship of he with his daughter Talia is amazing. Man-Bat. Man-Bat, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, one of the most tragic love stories ever told. Has so much depth to it. And then you take a guy who seems like he's campy, silly, idiotic, Mr. Freeze. But go and look what the people who did, the brilliant people who do Batman the Animated Series did. They did an episode with Mr. Freeze that to me is one of the greatest Batman stories ever told. And it is a tragic, tragic love story. So, you know, even when you think it can't possibly happen, there are some great people who are able to create something and make these villains soar and resonate. And again, as I agree with Stan Lee, it is these supervillains that keep Batman so fresh and alive over all the decades. Great question, thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Is there still someone? Is there someone in the back? Oh, over there. Yeah, perfect.
Sorry, a little bit nervous. From a comic book lover to another, from all the great stories about Batman, which is your favorite comic, from which would you like to see a movie?
Great question, thank you for that.
They keep on asking great questions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
These guys.
This is very cool. All right, so fanboy geek time now? Detective Comics number 439. Night of the Stalker. I don't believe it's ever been reprinted. This is a Batman story in which Batman never utters one word. Yet it is the most emotional, gripping, heart-tearing story of Batman I've ever read. Batman witnesses a crime that's about to happen that echoes the night where he saw his parents slaughtered in the street. And man, I hate to spoil it. I'm almost compelled to tell you the ending panel, but I can't do it. The ending of this story, you have never, ever, ever, ever seen Bruce Wayne. You've never, ever, ever seen Batman do what he does in the final panel of this story, and why. And so all I can tell you is track down this comic book or go online if anybody's ever put the pages up. Night of the Stalker, Detective Comics 439. I don't think anything rivals it. One of my favorite Batman issues of all time was Batman #1, because that introduces both the Joker and Catwoman. And that was one of the most seminal pieces. And boy, the Joker's a homicidal maniac right from the first page. And that was really, really cool. And if we have 10 more hours, I can then tell you my next 98 favorite Batman stories. But I will spare you those details unless you all want to go for some beers and pretzels with me. We can talk about it then.
Oh, I'm sure they would love to, right? So, is there one more question, or are you guys really happy with everything you heard, or is this something that you really want to ask?
Last chance.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Hello, thank you very much. You said very clearly that the goal in producing these movies was to show the dark side of Batman and the origins of Batman. So I would be very curious how it happened that you also produced the movie Batman and Robin, for example, who resembles in a lot of ways the 60s series with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze and everything, and how you feel about that.
Sometimes, generally, in the motion picture industry, studios become very, very enamored of toys and merchandising and Happy Meals. But let's talk about some of the other studios for a moment. And you have to understand how Hollywood operates. It operates in the studio system. If a studio puts up millions of dollars to make movies, they have final say. And you can voice an opinion, you can cry and beg, you can scream, you can plead, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's 20th Century Fox who makes the decisions. Of course not if Steven Spielberg's there or this one or that one who has that particular clout to do that. So sometimes you do in this industry the best you can do. And I'll end this with one anecdote that I said last night. So again, those of you who were there last night, forgive me for this. So when I first got the rights to Batman and went to Hollywood and pitched it, I was turned down by every single studio. They all told me it was the worst idea they ever heard, and that you can't make dark superheroes or serious comic book movies. So everybody told me, no, you suck, the idea stinks. It took 10 years for us to get the first Batman movie made from the time we bought the rights. 10 very, very, very long years. But when my partner Ben, who is again my dad's age, and I were at the last studio, and I was pitching my heart out for my dark and serious Batman, the guy said, Michael, no way, that's a terrible idea. But if you really want to do a Batman movie, we'll consider doing it with you, but it's got to be the funny, pot-bellied, pow-zap, wham Batman that everybody knows and loves. And I looked at him and I said, no way. And he looked at me and he said, son, better to have a movie made than no movie at all. And I said, no way. And after that, Ben and I were sitting on a bench on the lot of the movie studio, and I was down in the dumps. That was the last studio. We got a final rejection. And Ben looked at me and he said, you know, Michael, it's very ironic. Out of all the no's we got, the last one we got was from you. And he turned to me, he goes, you know what you are? And I said, yeah, I'm an idiot. And he says, no, you're Batman's Batman. You are his protector, and you are trying to be his defender. That's my role to this day. I try to be Batman's Batman. I try to protect and defend him when I can, where I can. And now, so many years later, and looking back at the great fortune and honor to have been able to be involved in projects with a genius like Tim Burton, a genius like Anton Furst, who designed Gotham City and the Batmobile, a genius like Danny Elfman, who composed the original score that still influences composers today, to have been working with a genius like Christopher Nolan, and more recently, got to give credit, two young guys, Chris Miller and Phil Lord, who did the Lego movie and were responsible for Lego Batman. I said, these young men are brilliant. And then they went on and did the Spideyverse animated movie. If you haven't seen it, you must see it. Once again, they reinvented and elevated the whole field of animation, and now I can also say I worked with those two geniuses as well. So I look back over this career and I go, you win some and you lose some, but you just do the best you can do. And my dad used to say, Michael, success is measured by how hard you try, not by what you accomplish. And that's something that I've managed to live by. And I know it's a very long answer and not a direct answer to your question, but it's about the best I can do.
That was a very beautiful last answer. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say we feel very honored that you took 1 hour to talk to us, to share these personal stories, to share stories about your work, your passion. I feel like I learned so much from you actually in the last 60 minutes. And I really hope you guys enjoyed it too. And let's give Michael Uslan a big round of applause.
Thank you.